Um, no. Hmm. Radio Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Dr. Alex Lathbridge, and this is Bite Size Biology. This is the 7th episode of a 9-part series on the cell. This episode is all about how things move in and out of cells through the cell membrane. There are 3 main ways that this happens, and we're going to cover them all today. Diffusion, osmosis, and active transport. Things need to move in and out of the cell to keep the organism alive. It helps keep the balance of molecules needed for survival, such as oxygen and water. You're going to need to be able to identify which kind of movement is happening in a cell, and to help you work that out, there are 2 questions that you should be asking yourself. What is the direction of travel, and which molecules are doing it? Okay, process number 1 is called diffusion. Alright, so I want you to imagine that you are at a party, a gathering of people in a generally fun space. You're in the corner of the room because it's a bit too crowded, so you want to move across the room to where there are fewer people. This is basically diffusion. It's the gradual movement of things from places where there are lots of them to places where there are fewer of them until it all evens out. For you to be able to party, of course, you need to pass your exams. So, in biological terms, the people at this party are called particles. Things like molecules and ions. And the room that you're in is a liquid or gas. The movement is happening all the time, and while one particle can go to an area where there are lots of other particles, if it really wants to, over time, they naturally move from crowded areas to less busy areas. This is basically what's known as a concentration gradient. An environment where you have a high concentration of particles in one area, but a low concentration in another. In basic terms, it's going from a place where there's lots of a particle to a place where there's not so many. This movement, this process of diffusion, is important because it's how glucose and oxygen move into the cells. And the cells need glucose and oxygen because that's how they react to release energy. And once they release that energy, there's stuff left over, carbon dioxide. And the cell needs diffusion to make that leave the cell. We're not going to do that now. This energy stuff is waiting for you in episode 9. This is important, so I'm going to recap that. Grab a pen so you can write this down. Diffusion is how particles, molecules, ions move from high concentration to lower concentration so they can spread out evenly through a liquid or gas. This is for carbon dioxide, water, urea, food, and waste. Diffusion is how glucose and oxygen move into cells so they can release energy. This process of releasing energy also forms carbon dioxide, which leaves the cell using diffusion. Diffusion can't occur in solids because the particles aren't free to flow like liquids and gases. Alright, so that is diffusion done. The second type of movement that you need to know is osmosis. But first, let's talk about orange squash for a bit. It is relevant, I promise. Now, if you add lots of water to your orange squash, it becomes lighter in colour. You're diluting it. A dilute solution contains a lot of water. But if you only add a tiny amount of water, then it's concentrated. This you can think of as a solution, which is water plus other stuff. Like, don't write those words in the exam, but that's how you can think about it for now. Why is squash relevant to osmosis? Well, osmosis is all about water molecules in solutions. It's a special type of diffusion just for water. Imagine it as diffusion through a sieve. So, in animals, your cells have dilute solutions of ions, sugars, and amino acids. The cells need these things, and when they're mixed with water, it means that they can enter and leave the cell when they're needed. The same principle as diffusion applies. Ions, sugars, and amino acids move from areas where there are lots of them to areas where there are fewer, making it all even out. This happens through something called a selectively or partially permeable membrane. This is a membrane that allows some things to pass through, but not others. Small things, but not big things, like a sieve. Remember that plants have a cell wall keeping them memory of the basics? Well, the cell wall is fully permeable, which means that it lets in and out all the molecules that the cell needs or doesn't need anymore. But when it comes to animal cells, including human cells, we don't have cell walls, which means that water makes our cells change size and shape, and they could burst if they take in too much water by osmosis. So it has to be strictly controlled, otherwise they can shrink, or worse, they can burst and become permanently damaged. So, to recap, in osmosis, water moves from high to low concentration through a semi-permeable membrane. So from a dilute solution with lots of water in it to a concentrated solution with less water in it. Our third and final process is known as active transport. It's called active because it needs energy to make it happen. The other types of movement, diffusion and osmosis, are called passive transport, which means they happen without the cell needing any energy to do it. Active transport happens when molecules need to move from a place of lower concentration to a place of higher concentration. Why should you care? Well, I'll tell you. Imagine that you are at a restaurant and you're eating some food. You're using energy to put that food into your mouth. At a certain point, you'll have some more, chips. Yeah, you'll have some more chips in your mouth than are left on the plate. Now, if this were diffusion or osmosis, your chips would gradually move out of your body until there were an equal amount on the plate and inside your mouth. But active transport allows you to say, "Shut up, you think that these chips that I paid for shouldn't be in my mouth? Foolishness!" Obviously you can't write that in your test, so let's think up some real world examples. Starting off with plants, let's think back to plants. They've got root hair cells that take minerals up from the soil into the plant. So at a certain point, there are going to be more minerals in the plant rather than outside. But active transport allows the plant to keep taking those minerals in. But what about in animals? Well, the carbohydrates in your food, like chips, are digested into glucose. The glucose then needs to be moved from the small intestine to the blood. All the glucose needs to go, but sometimes you might not have that much left, meaning there's more glucose in the blood than remains in the small intestine. Here, the cell uses energy, active transport, to help get that glucose out over the cell membrane and into the blood. That's it. Just 3 types. Diffusion, you want to move across the room cells when they're needed.
Fireworks, shut up. Oh, I had some good ones. What are these? What else is that now? I don't really have on the other side, is that? Good ones. Wow. Good ones. That's it. Uh-oh, stinky.